Rooftop Gardener. Tonight we visit a solitary man who cares for a high rooftop garden set above a layered city of chimneys, brass pipes, and quiet towers. We will follow his slow rounds under starlight as he waters, prunes, listens, and notices small lives moving in the leaves, while the city hums below. The roof is a flat rectangle of tar and old slate, edged by a waist-high wall of brick that keeps the wind in check. A dozen raised beds are arranged in tidy rows, all of them built from scavenged timbers and riveted corner braces. Copper pipes run between the beds like veins, each pipe fitted with tiny valves shaped like petals. A detail someone added for pleasure more than function. On the left side stands a rain barrel made from a cut-down boiler, banded in iron and patched where it once leaked. Two lanterns hang from wires along the railing, their glass thick and slightly green, and they give off a steady, warm light. Between them, string lines are fixed for climbing peas and night-blooming vines, with pale trumpets that open when the sun goes down. The door to the stairwell is wood reinforced with brass, and it creaks when the man pushes it open. A folded stool leans beside the door, and a basket with tools rests under it, handles polished from many years of use. The roof smells like damp soil, warm tar cooling, metal that has been touched by night air, and the faint sweetness of flowers that prefer darkness. The man is tall and spare, with rolled sleeves and a wool cap pulled low to keep the breeze off his ears. He moves softly on the roofing, feet finding familiar patches that never crack or squish. When he reaches the nearest bed, he sets down the watering can and presses 2 fingers into the soil beside a thyme bush. He checks the moisture without hurry, then gives the plant a measured pour until the top darkens and stops drinking. A beetle climbs a twig at the edge and pauses as if to watch. The man lets it be and shifts to the next plant. His jacket pocket holds a small ledger bound with cord and a pencil cut short, and he notes the bed number and the time with a simple mark. Somewhere below, a tram rings a calm bell as it turns a corner, the sound rising in a clean line between chimneys. Steam drifts from a vent on the building across the alley and breaks apart like torn cloth in the breeze. The man lifts his head to feel the air on his face, then returns to the thyme and pinches back 2 sprigs so it stays dense. The city around this garden is made of stacked neighborhoods and stitched streets, and most of it is visible from the roof when you stand by the eastern wall. A row of smokestacks stands at the far edge like black pencils, and their tops glow faintly with banked coals far below. Between the stacks, arches carry gas lines over alleys, each arch fitted with dangling pressure meters that shiver when a distant pump changes tempo. Closer in, a clock tower shows midnight on a large brass face with tiny star shapes cut into its hands. A few windows in nearby buildings are lit, and shadows move across them as people finish late work, read, or make tea. The rooftops are uneven, some pitched and tiled, others flat with tanks and small greenhouses like this one. A pair of airships sit at their moorings above the guild warehouse, fins at rest, anchor lines humming when the breeze catches them. Every so often, a rehearsal cannon in the watchyard thumps a low, distant test round, and pigeons lift briefly before settling like a grey blanket again. The man has watched this scene for years and knows which lights will go out first and which will burn until dawn. He carries the can to the barrel and opens the petal-shaped valve that feeds it, and water falls with a hollow echo inside the tank. The surface trembles and shows a crooked reflection of stars, broken by floating leaves that the man will strain out later. 2 moths flutter near the lantern glass and settle on the warm metal frame, wings closing like tiny folding fans. He dips the can slowly so as not to disturb the silt, and then straightens with a small grunt that does not sound like complaint. The next bed holds lettuces with edges curled like lace, and he works the spout low to the soil so droplets do not bruise the leaves. A spider web spans the gap between a trellis and the rim of the bed, and it holds a string of dew as clean beads. Though no dew has fallen, it is just fine mist from the barrel's mouth condensing. The man turns his wrist to avoid the web and leaves it intact, a path marker for tiny travelers. Far off, a whistle signals the change of shift at the river locks, and the sound arrives a heartbeat later than his lips expect. He nods once to the rhythm of the city and keeps pouring until the soil darkens to slate. Against the southern wall, an old iron bathtub sits on bricks and serves as a pond for water plants. The enamel is chipped in long scratches that show the metal beneath, and someone painted the chips with clear varnish to keep them from rusting deeper. On the surface float small, round leaves, each with a bright dot of starlight centered like a pin, and a pair of tiny fish move under the leaves in quick stop-start motions. A frog made the tub his home last spring and lurks near the drain end where the shadow is stronger. He blinks once, then again, patient as a stone. The man checks the pond by dipping a finger and then a thermometer on a string, and he jots the number in the ledger without fuss. A ring of stones lines the rim, and a cut piece of gutter feeds the tub in heavy rain. And tonight there is only a slow drip from the eaves. The frog shifts and the fish flash silver for a moment before stillness returns. The man picks a few yellowed leaves from the water plants and tucks them into a burlap sack that will later become mulch. On a low table stands a shallow box of sand and gravel, where cuttings take root beneath a pane of glass. Drops of condensation form on the underside of the pane and fall back in tiny taps that are pleasant to hear at this quiet hour. A row of rosemary stems sits in the sand, each trimmed to a neat angle and stripped of lower needles, and every few inches a wire hoop holds the glass up so air can pass. Beside them a pair of small citrus trees in terracotta pots lift glossy leaves, and near the base of one, a cluster of pale blossoms opens with a mild, clean scent. The man snaps the glass up with a practiced motion, lets the cuttings breathe, and inspects the bases for new roots with a thin stick. He mists them with a hand sprayer, whose handle squeaks on each squeeze, but never sticks. He taps the thermometer again, notes that it is cooler tonight than the last, and slides the glass pane back into its grooves. In the corner, a crate of seeds sits labeled by month, with ink tags and tiny knots of string to show which are saved from last harvest. He turns the crate a quarter turn so the dew does not find the gaps, and smiles at the steady order of it. A brass automaton the size of a house cat patrols the beds along a path marked by shallow grooves in the tar. Its body is a rounded cylinder with 4 articulated legs ending in soft pads that do not scuff the roof. A single eye, made from a crystal lens, moves on a gimbal, and every few steps the lens clicks into focus on a leaf, a blossom, or a suspicious shadow. A tiny chimney at the back vents a breath of steam, and a pressure gauge on its side ticks between 2 marks painted with a red nail of polish. The automaton pauses at the herb bed, extends a jointed prong, and deftly plucks a slug from the underside of a leaf, placing it into a small tin on its back. The tin rattles once and stills. The man kneels and checks the hinge on the left rear leg, applying a dot of oil from a bottle with a long neck. The automaton warbles in a cheerful rising note and resumes its route. The frog in the tub watches with round eyes, and then returns to his position, as if this is part of the nightly show. Beyond the barrel stands a row of night-blooming flowers that open wide cups and hold them steady toward the sky. Their stems are thick and furred, and if you touch one, it feels slightly cool, even under lantern glow. The blooms are pale cream, almost white, and the veins in the petals show as faint lines, easy to see if you hold the lantern low. Small moths feed from them, hovering on trembling wings that blur like tiny fans. A heavier visitor arrives with a soft buzz and a body striped in black and bronze. It hangs in front of a bloom and pushes its snout deep, then pulls back, dusty with pollen. The man leans closer and watches the insect choose 3 more flowers with steady care, never rushing its work. He smiles slightly and turns down the lantern wick to make the light gentler, and the moths move closer in. The air here is warmer than by the brick wall, as the plants make their own sheltered corner. Somewhere, a door slams 2 streets over. Then laughter rises and fades. But the moths do not seem to notice. The man's watering can is not the only way the garden stays alive. A clockwork pump system stands under a small shed, and he tends it as he tends the beds. The shed is a box of planks with a tin roof, and inside a flywheel turns at a slow, even pace, powered by a long spring that he winds each sunset. Curved blades lift water from a cistern in the stairwell and push it through the copper line that rings the roof. At each bed, a thumb valve can be opened to fill a basin or feed a drip line, and the entire system gives off a faint, rhythmic thrum. He kneels to check the tension on the belt that links flywheel to impeller, pressing with his thumb until it deflects the proper amount. The pump's pressure needle rests in a painted arc between two dots labeled "Safe," and he nods at it as if greeting an old neighbor. Every 10th night, he cleans the filter by unscrewing a glass cylinder and knocking loose sand and leaves that have gathered there. He does that now, using a wooden spoon handle, and the grit clinks on the floor and slides into a waiting pan. When he finishes, the pump ticks a little faster, pleased to be breathing freely again. His neighbors play small roles in the life of this roof, and he knows their patterns, though few words are ever exchanged. Across the way, a printer keeps a rooftop vent open late, and sheets of paper rise like pale birds when a stack is set to cool. A boy with ink on his fingers gathers them and weights them with stones. On the building to the north, an old woman feeds pigeons from a shallow tin pie plate, and the birds line up on her railing in polite order until she taps the plate twice, which means enough. On the alley side, a watchman makes his rounds, with a lantern that throws a circle on the brick as he passes below, and his boots ring on the metal grating of the fire stairs. A lamplighter moves along the street 2 terraces down, lifting the glass, touching wick to flame, and lowering the glass with a soft clink that marks each pool of light. Someone practices a violin with steady scales, and then starts a tune with slow bow strokes that carry easily through the open air. A cat crosses a run of rooftops with fluid hops, pauses to glare at the automaton, and then decides the machine is beneath notice. The man lifts a hand in greeting to them all, though none of them see him at this moment. He returns to his work, as if these small signs of life are as important as the watering notes in his ledger. The tallest bed holds small trees trained along wires into flat patterns. Pear and quince have been coaxed to lie against a frame, branches spread like neat fingers, so every leaf gets a fair share of light. The wire is wrapped in cloth where it meets the bark, and the cloth is replaced each season so it never bites. At the base of the frame, crushed shells lighten the soil, and a ring of stones keeps the roots cool, longer into the day. A little weathered figure carved from driftwood stands watch, with a calm face set toward the wind. And the man taps its head once with his knuckle, every night, out of habit. He checks for blight, and finds none, only a moth-egg cluster that he removes gently with a scrap of paper. A ladybird wanders the underside of a leaf, glossy shell catching the lantern in a pinprick flash. He leaves it to its meal and ties a new soft cord to guide a young branch along the next rung. The knot he makes is a loop that will slip as the branch thickens, neat and kind to living wood. Along the western edge, shallow trays hold gravel and broken crock to warm in the day and release heat at night. He set them there for the peppers and the low rosemary hedge that runs along the wall, and his idea works well when the wind is mild. He crouches and slides a hand under the rosemary canopy and finds it just warm enough, then plucks 2 long sprigs to dry for winter. Behind the hedge, a narrow gutter runs to a spout shaped like a lion head, and he sets a bowl beneath it to catch any surprise drip. The bowl is chipped blue ceramic and holds a smooth stone in the bottom, so it will not tip in a gust. A bat passes overhead, a dark arrow against the lighter patch of sky, moving fast and then gone again. The man stills without thinking, listening for more wings, but only the soft hiss of air past the vents answers him. He looks toward the far river, where low clouds show glows of furnace light, and then returns his attention to the hedge. A soft brush of his fingers frees a trapped leaf from the rosemary, and the release is a small, clean pleasure. He keeps a workbench near the door, with 3 drawers and a shelf of jars, and this is where he finishes repairs that do not belong to the plants, but help them along. In the first drawer lie short lengths of wire, cloth ties, and spare valve petals, waiting for a leak to require them. The second holds knives, a whetstone, and a pair of shears, whose blades shine even in weak light. The third is for seeds in envelopes folded from old notices, each marked with the date and a quick sketch of the plant. On the shelf, glass jars keep string, wax, small screws, and a cake of soap that he uses to ease sticky drawers. He sets the ledger down and checks tonight's marks, adding a small circle beside the pond to show he remembered the thermometer. A damp cloth wipes soil from the bench surface, and he straightens a nail that tilts like a loose tooth along the front edge. The lantern hangs above, and its flame pops gently as a tiny pool of fuel opens in the wick and is burned. He breathes in, breathes out, and puts the shears on the right side, where they always sleep. Sometimes the roof receives visitors from the sky, and tonight a messenger kite lands on the far rail with a light tap of boned feet. The kite is a slim thing, with leathery wings stretched between thin rods, and ribbons hang from its tail with little brass clappers that ring when it dives. A small metal tube is strapped to its chest with a leather band. The man walks slowly so as not to startle it, raises a hand, and lets the kite hop onto his wrist. It is warmer than it looks, like a living glove. He unbuckles the tube and removes a paper slip that bears only a simple question about the state of the wind, from a sailor he knows on the river. The man looks at the jars he keeps as makeshift anemometers, thin sticks with dangling threads, and then at the strings that hum along the rails. And he writes, "Steady, from the east, mild." He returns the slip, gives the kite a pat, and a small strip of dried fruit from a tin, and lifts his arm. The kite spreads its wings, beats twice, and is gone into the night, without a backward look. Near the center of the garden, a square of stones makes a sitting place, and here the man unfolds his stool and rests. He sets the can beside him, with the handle turned outward, so it will be easy to lift again after a pause. The stones keep a little heat from the day, and are pleasant through the seat of his trousers. He does not look for meaning in the stars, but he looks at them until his eyes water a little from the cool air. The constellations above this city are familiar, and a few new lights move among them. Small maintenance balloons with tiny burners that drift between towers. He rubs his thumb over the callus at the base of his fingers, where the shears press in long work, and it feels like a badge he never asked for and never wants to lose. The automaton settles by his boot with a soft whir as its spring reaches rest, and the frog gives one measured chirp from the tub. A cloud crosses the moon and then slides away, and the lantern wicks glow brighter for a moment in the change. When he rises again, he makes one last slow circuit, the same every night, always in the same order. He checks each valve by touch, not by sight, and turns any that weep a little until the seal firms. He pulls a blanket of netting over the tender bed by the chimney, where night birds sometimes peck, and he clips it down with small wooden pegs. He looks under the bench for the sack of trimmings and ties it shut with string, then moves it to the stairwell to carry down in the morning. He shapes the soil with the trowel so no part forms a bowl that will flood at the next rain, smoothing it like the surface of a calm pond. He lifts the glass on the cuttings box and lets the air trade places once more, then lowers it gently and hears the small click of wood on wood. He turns down the lanterns so their light becomes a thin set of halos more than illumination. He taps the driftwood figure's head and sets the automaton's key for 3 turns in the morning. He puts his palm on the brick wall to feel how much heat it still holds, and the warmth is a quiet promise of plain help.